Hey, everybody out there in internet land. Thank you for joining us, and please welcome our guest, Eyal Levi. You may know him from the class he did with us back in September called Digital Drums with Easy Drummer. You may also know him as one of the brains behind Audiohammer Studios in Orlando, Florida. His credits, their credits in general as a team, the other people there are Jason Sukoff and Mark Lewis, whose names you may also know. If it's a metal band and they've made a record within the last 10 years, then Audiohammer's probably worked with them. Everybody from old guard legends like Death Angel to or Cannibal Corpse, Deicide, to a lot of newer bands like Black Dahlia Murder, Whitechapel, August Burns Red, Devil Driver. I mean, check out their discography. If you're listening to it, they probably worked on it. So he's also a good friend of mine who's taught me a ton about recording, and I think has a lot to offer the world in terms of the knowledge he's accumulated over the past 10, 15 years behind the board. So we want to spend a few minutes today talking with him about what to expect from the class he will be joining us for on January 16th called Advanced Drum Production. So we're very happy to have him back again. Want to talk to him a little bit about that, and also get into a little bit of the details and talk shop about some of the stuff they do at Audiohammer to get their amazing drum sounds. So Eyal, thank you for joining us, and happy Friday, although you're a producer so you don't get Fridays.
And no such thing as a Friday, but thanks for having me yet again. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, so I wanted to quickly first touch on the theme of this series of interviews we've been doing over the past, Aaron, today's the last day, right? Yeah. Yeah, so the past 12 days is giving. And when we were talking about it before, you said you weren't very good at giving, but I don't think that's true. I think you're actually very generous. For example, maybe in a little bit of a different way, but you give away a ton of your knowledge. For example, like on your Q&A Tumblr, which if anybody wants to check it out is Eyal Levi, EYALLEVI.tumblr.com. So on your Tumblr there, you take recording music questions from kids, answer them to the best of your ability, hundreds and hundreds of them. You've given a lot of knowledge back to the community. Can you talk about why you started doing that and why you think that giving knowledge away is so important?
Well, first of all, I don't think there's any real secrets out there as far as recording goes. Anything that you can learn from stealing a setting, you can just look up online and find about 15 different ways to do it. So why not just tell people how to do it? And I know that my career has benefited immensely from people helping me out. I know that back in the day, Colin Richardson was sharing tricks with me. Jason Sukoff shared lots of tricks with me, still does. Mark Lewis has helped me out tremendously. All these heavy hitters have helped me out along the road, and without their help, I'd be nowhere with recording. And I wish that I had only met them sooner. So I figure that if there's somebody out there that's going to get good anyways, may as well be there to help them out, and then we can be friends about it, because you're not going to stop them. So may as well save them a few years, and there's no harm that'll come from it. So
I mean, I look at it like if you can give away the keys to the castle, all the secrets to your techniques in a 2-paragraph Tumblr post, then maybe your techniques weren't so special to begin with.
well, that's the thing, really. The real part of getting great sounds and all that is hard work, and you can't give hard work away. So, I mean, maybe you can give a preset away or some quicker way to mic a snare or something like that, but if the person on the receiving end doesn't take the time to get really good at what he's doing, it doesn't matter who's helping them out. So, some people are worried that you're arming the competition or the future competition by doing this sort of thing, and I don't think so. Like I said before, they're going to get good. They're going to get good anyways. So if you happen to be giving info to a diamond in the rough and he's going to be your future competition, that would have happened whether or not you helped him, and you may as well be friends about it. And it's always good to be friends about it, because then maybe they can help you out. in the
don't we
future,
all
too.
want more good producers out there? Do we want more bad ones? I mean,
We want more good producers, and we want to be friends with more
Yeah.
good producers, because good producers will share their knowledge with you and help you out when you get into a bind and you hit a wall with a mix or something like that. It's good to have a bunch of those guys you could call and ask for some advice on. If you don't help anybody out ever and basically stay in a cave, as you can see, I live in a cave. Most control rooms are caves. If you keep everything really, really guarded, don't help anybody out ever, eventually one day you're going to hit a wall with your own mixing and there will be nobody there to help you out. Doesn't seem like a good idea to me.
I mean, look what it did for Andy Sneap. You know, he was one of the first guys to really actively share his share information on the internet, like on his the Andy Sneap forum. You know, he posted his multi-band compressor settings, which you can still find. You know, he wrote a long post about exactly how he does everything. Did that flood the world with Andy Sneaps? No, because the magic ingredient there is Andy, not his settings.
No, there's still only one Andy Sneap.
And that did a lot for his career. You know, a lot of people, he's top of mind now because and a lot of people look up to him and respect him, as they should. Because I think that's another thing is like when you tell people your settings and they apply them and don't get the same results as you do, they kind of realize, oh, wait, maybe there's more to it than that. So I think that actually helps people respect the value of you as the individual.
I remember maybe 10 or more years ago when he posted his settings and I copied them and it didn't sound the same at all. It sounded like garbage. I couldn't understand. I thought that I was going to suddenly, I thought I was getting audio gold.
Right.
And
like, here's the Machine Head preset.
Yeah. Suddenly I was going to be Andy Sneap Jr. or something, and none such luck. It sounded like garbage. So, the whole part about that preset is for a situation involving a musician and involving certain gear that they used and a certain musical choice, program material. That whole part is not in the preset.
It'd be like telling somebody, if they're in a race, just step on the gas and you'll win the race.
Basically, drink Gatorade.
Yeah. So, with that out of the way, wanted to kind of talk a little bit about what you will be teaching in your advanced drums class. So it's going to be called Advanced Drum Production. It's going to be January 16th, 17th, and 18th here in Seattle. Of course, free to watch live on the internet like everything we always do. And this will be your second one for us, a follow-up to your Digital Drums with Easy Drummer class in September. Do you want to tell us a little bit about exactly what you'll be covering and what people will learn from it?
Sure. Well, I think that recording drums is one of the hardest things to do in recording because there's so many moving pieces and so many opportunities for everything to just get derailed. Yet it's arguably the most important part of any recording because it's the foundation. Without that, you've got nothing. Your foundation needs to be rock solid or you really have nothing. And I don't really know that how to do this properly is taught anywhere, at least not for metal. And like I've said before, if it was taught properly, I wouldn't need to retrain interns or assistant engineers. But fact is, every single time that I get somebody, I have to completely scrap what they've got and rebuild. So.
And for everybody out there on the internet, I've seen these notes that Eyal gives to his assistant. It's about 5 or 6 pages of this in like excruciating detail of crossfade this many milliseconds, do this, do that. So, I mean, the kind of information that you give them is so excruciatingly detailed that there is no way anybody in their right mind would ever create this if they didn't have to.
No, it's not for the meek at all. But I haven't seen anywhere that you can actually learn this besides what we're about to do. So basically, we are going to show people how to record drums properly from start to finish. And from start to finish, I mean everything from choosing the drum set, tuning it, choosing mics, preamps, dealing with phase, actually tracking a drummer, what to do if the drummer is not up to par, what to do if the drummer is up to par, and we're going to cover, well, what if you don't have a drummer, which is actually reality these days. So we'll do a full day on Toontrack's Superior Drummer, which is, I guess, the best virtual drum software out there. And then we will do a third day all about drum editing, drum replacement, drum mixing. You know, that's the stuff that you have to do whether or not you have a real drummer or virtual drums. So it's going to be pretty comprehensive. And aside from maybe piecing together about 10,000 different tutorials into something that kind of resembles this, I don't know anywhere else where you'll be able to get this information. And let me also say that we have the most amazing in-studio drummer ever for this. His name is Sean Reinert. He's been in the band Cynic and the band Death. Well, he still is in the band Cynic, and I've worked with him before in the studio. And those of you who know who he is know that he's God level. Those of you who don't will know that. He's absolutely unbelievable. So this class should be great.
Yeah, when we were able to lock in Sean as the in-studio drummer, my inner 14-year-old squealed with excitement because, you know, I grew up listening to all those records. I grew up listening to, you know, Cynic and Death and Atheist and all that stuff. And Sean was always, in my opinion, you know, there's a lot of good musicians in that scene. I don't think it gets any better than Sean. And to be able to
I don't either.
To be able to have him in studio is awesome. I'm incredibly excited for it. And so you mentioned quite a few hot button topics in there, virtual drums, sample replacement, stuff like that. And so I wanted to quickly touch on that a little bit, just so people kind of understand where you're coming from, because I know the first question that everyone's going to ask, because it came up in your Easy Drummer class. I know the question that's going to come up is, how real are the drums on metal records these days, and what exactly does real mean?
Well, they really do sound like drums. That's about as real as they are.
Sometimes they do.
Yeah, sometimes. Sometimes they just sound like a sneeze in a basketball. But I think that it all depends on the reality of the situation, meaning who's the drummer, who's the band, what's the music, and can they actually pull this off? Like, if they want a big natural drum sound, yet they can't play any of it, and it's not possible to hire a session drummer to play this stuff because it's just way too technical, well, the chances are it's not going to be real drums just because there's no one who can do it. I would always prefer to record real drums, but there's something that happens when you record a really, really bad drummer and you go to edit him, which is called torture. And I like to avoid being tortured. So does every other engineer I know. So if it's between recording a really bad drummer, playing super technical material horribly, or programming it, you can bet a lot of money that it's going to be fake drums.
Well, what about kind of the middle ground where, you know, there is a real drummer playing a real set, but then there's some post-processing going on? Like, what are the extremes of that? On the one hand, where you like pretty much completely redo everything. On the other hand, there's probably some situations where you don't, and then in between. Like, can you talk a little bit about kind of the various ways that can take shape?
Well, every single metal record out now in 2013, 2014 has samples on the drums. And that just means that there's I guess another drum hit that the drummer didn't actually play, pasted in to go exactly with their performance. And you can stack those like 10 deep or one, or it doesn't matter how many you use. It just depends on what it sounds like. But having drum performances augmented by samples is a normal thing. And I guess the trick with that is determining whether or not you want the sample to be dominant or you want the sound of the real drums to be dominant. And again, that comes down to what you captured with the real drummer. If the real drummer did a great job, then you can go higher on that ratio with the real drums and lower with the samples. But sometimes if the drummer just hits really lightly and no power behind his hits or anything like that, no real tone to what he does, it's probably better to have the samples be louder. Just total game time decision kind of stuff.
So on that note, I was kind of wondering about this. Since we, signed Sean to be part of this, I went back and listened to some of the old Death and Cynic records, and his performances are like unbelievable. To my ears, they sound essentially perfect. And I really have a hard time believing that most of the drummers in metal these days would be able to pull that off given the technology of the time. I mean, those were all analog records. You couldn't really edit things the same way that you can now. You certainly couldn't sample replace things. What's it like working with somebody like him or Kevin or whoever, that Kevin Tolley, who came up in an era before the digital stuff that we have now? What are the differences in working with them?
Well, it's super easy to work with Sean because, like, for instance, on the guitar album I did with him, he tracked the whole thing in 6 hours. The really, really good musicians from the analog era can get their parts done really fast because that's how they came up. They had to actually be able to nail this stuff in the studio. So I find it to be super easy. Just set up and go, and the drums get handled by the drummer. It's a real novel concept these days. And I'd say Kevin is one generation younger than Sean. So he's halfway in the old school and halfway in the new school.
But still, when you guys started out, like on the kind of recordings, so I don't know, Kevin's played in a zillion bands. I couldn't even pretend to remember all of them, but like Dying Fetus is one of them. And, all these, when he was starting out in the late 90s with the budgets that those bands had, those are all real performances. Maybe triggered kicks or something.
And he keeps that up nowadays. But he knows how to record for modern day stuff. So like if it's pointless to record super fast kicks just because it's going to destroy the room mics and all that, he already has his recording technique down to where it's totally easy for him to do half the amount of kicks, or no kicks even, if it's going to make the recording better. Then that's what I mean when I say that he's halfway in the new school. But still, since he comes from a time period where you actually had to play the stuff, his recording sessions also are really fast. I mean, you can cut a whole album in 8 hours with that guy. Or you could take a week, depending on what you're working on. But if you take a week, it's because there's an artistic reason to take that long. And I guess that's what Sean and Kevin have in common. They know their parts. They know exactly what to do. And if they don't know exactly what the parts are, they have a process in their mind for how they will figure it out quickly and on the spot. So they know how to record or be recorded. And that's something that modern drummers could learn from, I think.
I mean, I'm sure, I'm not like being the old man and being like, oh, these new guys suck. I know that there are plenty of great modern new drummers too.
Just recorded one with Mark Lewis. His name's Alex Rudinger. The guy's 22 years old, and
he's from the Faceless, right?
He's from the Faceless. Yeah, he is unbelievable, and he got stuff done really fast. 22. He's totally from the new generation. So it's not like it doesn't exist these days at all. But definitely diamond in the rough status.
Sure.
When guys can do that kind of thing.
Speaking of that, from talking to you, I know that the one thing that, so you've worked on some records I know people use as like benchmarks. For example, Black Dahlia Murder, Ever Black. I know that's an album that people listen to are like, holy shit, we want to sound like this. They give it to the producer, we want to sound like this. And
good luck.
Yeah, well, sure. And the reason why you say good luck is because the one common thread I know that runs through all of these, or Chelsea Grin, like the guitars, with Jason Richardson, is all of those have really great players in the band that did great performances on the album. Can you talk about, like, in regards to drums, what the benefits of working with one of those really great players is that you're not going to get through, through a digital solution?
Yeah, those drummers have a way of approaching their parts that's unique to them. And unless you are a drummer or a drummer at that level, you're just not going to come up with the parts on level with what they would. So even if they're programming the parts, that's still better than you programming the parts if you're not that good. It's basically hiring someone better than yourself to do a really important job. So yes, you could definitely program the drums and probably get it to sound pretty good if you're a decent enough engineer. But a lot of what people hear on these records is the arrangement of the music and the performance of the music, but mainly the arrangement. And that starts with the drums, and that takes the mind of that drummer to happen, or the mind of, like, say, Brian in Black Dahlia Murder, who writes everything on a drum machine and then gives it to a drummer to play exactly like he wrote it. Like, you're not Brian from Black Dahlia Murder.
Right.
Maybe hire Brian to do your arrangements.
Just because Brian or Scott Hull does a great job with, virtual drums, are you Brian or Scott Hull? No.
No, exactly. And I'm not advocating aiming low or anything, or saying just because I'm not Brian from Black Dahlia, my stuff's not going to sound good. But it's good to be realistic about where you're at.
Well, I guess my point is, like, if you want to sound like one of these great recordings that you've worked on, looking for software or samples or this or that or gear is not the place to find that sound. The answer is practice more.
Yeah, the answer is people.
Right.
The people make the recordings great.
I've said this a million times, but I could sit down at your mixing console with all your presets and stuff, and you could sit down at my crappy laptop in my bedroom with my copy of Logic and stock plugins, and your recordings would sound 1,000 times better than mine, because the magic ingredient there is you, not me. And it's the same with drums. It doesn't matter what plugin, what samples you're using. It doesn't matter how you EQ, compress them. If you got a great drummer in there, it's going to sound great. If you don't have one, it's not going to be great.
That's absolutely correct.
It might be pretty good. You can take an okay drummer and make him sound pretty good, but you can't make. I don't think you can make greatness if it's not there. You can make pretty goodness, but not greatness.
There's something about taking something to an A+ level where I don't think you can take a B- to an A+. You can take an A to an A+, but it needs to come in at an A in order for you to get it to that next level. If you're hanging around at a B- level, technology isn't going to get you that next step up. It just won't. It doesn't work that way.
Well, it's a really simple thing, but it really stuck with me. Andrew Wade said in his guitars class, we were talking about EQ, and he does very little EQ on his guitars, and he was like, well, EQ is not going to make a bad tone into a good one.
No, it's just going to carve it into a mix.
Yeah.
You have to start with a good tone. It has to be good at the source. We have a very similar philosophy towards guitars. EQ, very little. You should almost be able to get away with no EQ, or very little, like I said. If you're finding that you have to add plugins and add plugins and add plugins and add plugins and add plugins, then there's probably something wrong at the source.
And the same applies to drums, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, same thing for everything that has to do with recording, except for maybe vocals. You can add a million plugins with that.
Just use MIDI vocals.
Yeah, easy vocalist.
I wanted to talk shop a little bit about a couple specific techniques that you mentioned, and I know you're going to be covering in this class, because I know that that's what a lot of people are going to be interested in. To start with, you talked a little bit about sample layering, and that's something I have never experimented with myself, but I want to get into. So I know you guys use that a lot. You touched on that, like, and in particular, I want to understand how you use that to go from an A to an A plus. Like, so when you're working with a great drummer like Shannon Lucas or something like that, and you're using samples, you're not like replacing every snare hit on the album because he sucks. You're just taking the snare hits that are there and making them better. Like, can you talk a little bit about specifically how you use sample layering or in that kind of a situation?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, when you're dealing, Shannon's a perfect example. When you're dealing with someone like Shannon Lucas who plays things in like 2 takes, you really don't want to replace what he did because it's great. But lots of drummers, great drummers too, have a tendency to maybe start playing a little lighter with their hands when their feet start going super fast or whatever. There's just a physical body playing these drums, and it can't be going all out at all times with every limb. So you use the samples in cases like that to keep things a little bit more even. Sometimes these drummers don't hit the snare as hard as you would like them to. For instance, maybe they get a really good tone, but it's just not that crack that punches you in the face like you want a snare to have. So you grab a sample or 2 or 3 that combined have that crack, and you layer them underneath the actual performance, and there you go. It's not actually replacing, it's just enhancing.
So how do you, so throughout the song, you know, there may be one part, like during a slow part, you may want more body. During a fast part, you want a little more presence, whatever. How do you like automate those throughout the song? Is it like just levels, EQ, all of those?
Painstakingly. Well, I'm not big on changing EQ too much throughout the song, unless if it's like an effect that kicks in, like a radio effect or something like that. I think that you can achieve it more with volume and the blend of the samples. Like, for instance, if you have a sample, I guess a bunch of samples that blend well together for super hard hits, they might sound ridiculous when the drummer goes to a snare roll. So at that point, you might want to change the blend to where one that has slightly more of the bottom snare sound, make that louder, or just turn down the samples completely and have the real snare go during the fast rolls. It's totally a situationally dependent thing, but personally, I like to do it with the blend of the samples or just with volumes.
Do you usually keep the whole sample? So let's say you've got 4 snare samples. Do you usually use the whole sample, or do you filter it to just have like the low end or high end from one, or is that totally dependent, situational too?
Sometimes you do that, but from what I've noticed, you usually pick different samples for their characteristics. Like, this sample has more low end, this sample has more of a crack to it, and then with volume, you get the blend.
So you don't typically filter them too much?
Well, I EQ them sometimes to get rid of the bad stuff.
But not super heavy? You're not like isolating it just down to like, you know, a 100, you know, cycle band or anything like that?
You can definitely do that. I do that with kicks sometimes, where we'll filter out all the bottom end from a parallel kick and compress the crap out of it so that the high end just knocks right through the speaker, and blend that in. Like, yeah, stuff like that happens. Parallel EQ chains on samples, but really, I think you just have to pick the right samples to have the characteristics you're looking for. If you're looking for more of a fat thud, it's you should probably pick a sample that's got fat thud, whatever that means, in it already. And then, of course, you can EQ it to exaggerate that. But if it doesn't already have that to begin with, why are you using that sample for that purpose? And keep looking.
Another thing that, another technique that I think is interesting, I know you guys aren't the only ones that do it, but and if you look at the graphic for the course page for your January class, you can see this. That's actually the Whitechapel's drum set. You'll notice there's no actual kick drums in there. There's just 2 kick pads. Can you talk about when and why you use that technique, and how often you use it?
Well, there's a few different situations where we use kick pads, and it's not what everyone thinks. Sometimes we use kick pads with really great drummers, and it's more so that we can have the room mics be I guess, untampered with by kick drum frequencies. Like, we have a really amazing drum room, and really want to bring out every nuance of the cymbals. And the cymbals are a very, I guess, butchered element in metal recordings. And having a great room and great microphones and great preamps like we do here, we really pride ourselves on being able to bring those out. But when you have kick drums going the whole time, that really gets in the way of having good room mics and good overheads. Now, mind you, for like rock music or something, it's not that big of a deal because the kick drum happens so infrequently. But when you're talking about something like Whitechapel, where you'll have 16th note or 16th note triplet double bass going for entire sections, like, that will really mess up your overheads. And that drummer's great. So it's not that he can't play real bass drums. And so we make a choice for the better of the recording. Now, the other situation is the drummer just cannot play his kick drums, and that's pretty common as well. And then, again, for the sake of not tampering with the overheads in the rooms, you just record a kick track and then program the bass drums or the samples. It totally depends on the situation. Some drummers will not let you do that. For instance, like Shannon Lucas will not let you use a kick pad, but he's so good that it doesn't matter. He also has his kick drums very muted to where they don't really interfere with your overheads in your rooms. So totally depends, but it's all about having the best overheads in rooms you possibly can. And also there's one more factor involved, which is editing. When you have kick drums that are all over the place in your overheads in your rooms, say you have to cut up the kicks, like completely replace the kicks or totally cut them up. If they're in all the overheads in the rooms, you're going to have to cut those up as well, and you will completely mess them up, as opposed to having completely separate kicks. That's a very beneficial thing.
Cool. So, well, we're just about out of time, but do you want to let people know where they can find you on the internet?
Yeah, you can find me at eyallevy.tumblr.com or unstoppabлекillingmachine or Instagram.unstoppabлекillingmachine, I believe.
At Unstoppable Killing Machine,
yes.
On Instagram, yes.
That's right, that's me.
You also have a couple columns that you write about. Do you want to tell people where to find those?
Yeah, there's one on an amazing site called metalsucks.net, where nothing is sacred and it's all about metal, every angle and viewpoint you can imagine about it. And I have one on there called Jumping Darkness Parade. And I also have one on Pro Sound Web, which is a super legitimate and serious recording website, the complete opposite of Metal Sucks. It's actually a very technically minded recording column. So you can find me there as well.
Cool. And if you're interested in hearing more details about techniques we were talking about like editing, sample replacement, getting great tones, getting great performances, all that stuff, go to creativelive.com/audio, click on the advanced drum production class, sign up for that. It's January 16th through 18th here on Creative Live. As always, it's free to watch live. And so he's going to be spending 3 days going into extensive detail about this stuff. It's literally the only place on the planet you can learn this stuff other than sitting in the control room with the guys like Eyal and Jason and Mark that do this stuff every day. So if you want to know how to make world-class, amazing modern drum recordings, then check in January 16th through 18th, and I think you'll be very happy with what you see. Thanks to everybody who's watching. Thank you to Eyal for joining us, and we'll see you then.